Coming up, right now, it looks like Alexander Boris to Pfeffel Johnson is edging ever closer to the door marked exit, and for me, that time cannot come soon enough. The mask of an incompetent, corrupt, arrogant and offensive truth twister has been ripped off.
Let's see if he's who we think he is.
To reveal underneath the face of an incompetent, corrupt, arrogant and offensive truth twister, let's take a look at the latest revelations over the past week or so, which seems to have sealed his fate. Before we get into it, please like this video, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be notified of future releases. I've already released several videos highlighting numerous examples of Tory corruption and conflicts of interest over the past few months, and the viewing figures for those videos were a fraction of my videos on Brexit or on Patel, for example. It's always surprised me how blatant Tory corruption has not evoked the same level of interest amongst the British population as Brexit and other disastrous Tory policies. But I'm convinced that following a week or so of further revelations of corruption and conflicts of interest, that's now changed. We'll see. Even an older story concerning the funding of Johnson's Downing Street flat refurbishment has hit the news again, with further revelations surfacing this past week. To remind you, the Prime Minister's current wife, Carrie Johnson, whose name doubles as a job description, said it was essential that the makeover was carried out by the most expensive and ghastly interior designer that money could buy. And as the Johnsons couldn't afford it, and the taxpayer would only stump up a measly 50 grand towards it, a fraction of what Carrie wanted to spend, her husband approached multi-millionaire Tory peer David Brownlow for the extra dosh. Brownlow is a trustee of the Royal Albert Hall, and he had a grand ambition to hold a great exhibition at the venue, based on the original 19th century event held at Crystal Palace. A puff piece for his ego and prestige. And he needed a government commitment in order to make that happen. So the scene was set for Johnson to get onto WhatsApp to try to wheedle the necessary filthy lucre out of the peer in order to satiate Carrie's need for appalling interior decor, including £800-a-roll gold wallpaper. Johnson ended his begging message on WhatsApp with, "P.S. am on the Great Exhibition plan, will revert." Lord Brownlow messaged back with a promise to send over the dosh and to thank Johnson for thinking about his Great Exhibition proposal. Johnson subsequently arranged for Brownlow to meet the Culture Secretary in order to pitch the plan. As clear an example of corruption as you could find. And as Labour Deputy Leader Angela Rayner pointed out, it's made even worse by the fact that Johnson told a load of lies to cover up this corruption, claiming to have forgotten all about the WhatsApp conversation because he'd lost his phone. I make that roughly 267 phones that members of this Johnson government have lost, broken or given away to family members since they took office. This new evidence means that the original inquiry, where Johnson's behaviour was deemed unwise by his so-called independent Ministerial Standards advisor, Lord Geidt, should be reopened, with Angela Rayner and others asking Lord Geidt to do precisely that. Blimey, always so many lords involved with this government. But I suppose that's what happens when the House of Lords has more members than a European Parliament which covers 27 nations. Unelected bureaucrats, eh? But a couple of weeks ago, it was widely reported that Geidt was considering resigning his role as Standards Advisor after an Electoral Commission investigation found that Johnson's statement to Lord Geidt that he knew nothing about how the refurbishment of his Downing Street flat was being funded was a lie, leading to a fine of £17,800 for the Tory party for improperly declaring what was in effect a donation. And don't forget, in another old story covered on this channel, Geidt's predecessor on Ministerial Standards, Sir Alex Allen, resigned after he found Home Secretary Priti Patel guilty of long-term systematic bullying of civil servants and was overruled by Johnson. But back to this week, when more evidence of corruption emerged relating to lingerie mogul Michelle Mone, ex-dragon from BBC's Dragon's Den, and yet another Tory peer. She referred a company called PPE MedPro to the government's VIP lane scheme for COVID-related contracts. Well, apparently, her husband had a business interest in the firm, which was newly created and had no track record of supplying medical equipment. PPE MedPro was immediately awarded an £80 million contract to supply masks and gowns. Moan herself was reportedly engaged in product decisions via the Tories' favourite medium, WhatsApp, and was reported to have been incandescent with rage over the subsequent treatment of the company by civil servants. Should have given Priti Patel a call, she'd have sorted them out for you, Michelle. But enough of that, there's more corruption to come this same week. Dim Lizzie Truss, our illustrious Foreign Secretary, Brexit Secretary, Women's Secretary, Equality Secretary, and goodness knows what else Secretary, apparently ordered civil servants to book a £3,000 lunch at eye-wateringly expensive club 5 Hertford Street, owned by Tory and UKIP donor Robin Burley, half-brother to the racist ex-London mayoral candidate Zach Goldsmith. Yet another Tory lord, of course. Good grief. There's no end to them, is there? The venue was known as Brexit HQ during and after the referendum campaign. Public funds paid for the lunch, of course, including several £65 bottles of wine. And Truss has a track record of extravagance with public money to cover expenses for her and her staff, having had to answer parliamentary questions in the past following a trip to Asia 2 years ago. She tried to cover that up, just like she tried to avoid answering freedom of information requests about her latest extravagances. Truss, like the corrupt Matt Hancock, the corrupt Owen Paterson, the corrupt honest Bob Jenrick, and many other members of the Tory elite, believe that they can either lie or buy their way out of every transgression. And the trouble is, amongst an uninformed and disinterested electorate, voters just tend to think about politicians that they're all as bad as each other, to coin a phrase. And they fail to identify corruption as the, not exclusively, but overwhelmingly Tory phenomenon that it is. As regular viewers know, I have reservations about the Labour Party's direction of travel under Keir Starmer. But despite some of my political bedfellows' description of Starmer as a closet Tory, on this issue, come on, can you really see him, Angela Rayner, Rachel Reeves, Emily Thornberry or Wes Streeting embroiled in these sorts of sleazy examples of cash for favours, cash for honours or VIP lane style corruption? This level of corruption was last seen in the government of John Major back in the 90s, and it's no coincidence that it's happening again under a different Tory government. And these are not victimless crimes. Just think, Michelle Mone in the House of Lords is depriving somebody far more suitable of a role there. The PPE contract she won for that company meant another far more deserving company was deprived of an £80 million contract. This same Tory one rule for us mentality has shown its face once more this week in the Downing Street Bring Your Own Bottle garden party in Downing Street on May the 20th, 2021, details of which have been reported by ITV News in the very same week as all the corruption stories that we've already covered in this video. 100 staff invited to congregate at a social event actually attended by at least 40 people. Yet less than 1 hour before this gathering, Cabinet Minister Oliver Dowden, taking Johnson's place at that day's COVID briefing, presumably because Johnson was getting ready for the party, told the public to stick to meeting in pairs outdoors despite the sunshine. This time, the Met Police have no choice but to launch a criminal investigation into this latest government breach of its own lockdown laws. And who will pay the resulting fine? I think Lord Brownlow may be expecting another WhatsApp message from Johnson's burner phone very soon.